Today I've pulled out a bunch of vintage still lenses that I like to use for video. Vintage still lenses for video is not a new thing, but these are a bunch of ones that people use a lot, and I wanted to show some real examples from footage that I've shot for clients over the last couple of years using these lenses. The main reason I find myself drawn to using these lenses is they're inspiring. They have an interesting look to them. Each is a little bit different. When people used to shoot on film, the film itself imparted a bunch of character into the image, great color, the organic nature of film, but with the trade-off that it wasn't as sharp as what we have now. So a lot of times the emphasis in the lens choice was sharpness. But I think there's been a bit of a flipping of that now as we get more and more really incredible modern digital sensors that are incredibly detailed, but also a bit clinical or neutral at least. And so when you pair it with some of these older lenses that can still be sharp, but have personality, they have imperfections, it can create an interesting mix that allows you to play. So a lot of times, especially with fashion, where there isn't much in the way of story per se, if I'm having trouble coming up with an idea that feels specific enough, I will try to find a lens that I think could be interesting and see if that doesn't start to inspire ideas. The one other detail that I should mention is all these lenses are easily adaptable. I've got them all adapted to EF mount, which I use on my Red Komodo. They all, of course, work with the Super 35 sensor. However, I tend to use them most with my Canon 0.71 focal reducer, because if I'm going for maximum character, then it's best to use as much of the image circle as possible, and the focal reducer does that, especially on the Red Komodo, which has a very large Super 35 sensor. When you pair that with the focal reducer, you're using a larger portion of the image circle than on a lot of full frame cameras. The only lenses that I'm gonna hold off on talking about too much today are the Mamiya Seikor Cs. I haven't had a chance to use them too much. I've liked what I've seen in tests, but the main reason I bought those was I was interested to pair them using the focal reducer on the V-Raptor, which gives you a huge field of view and takes up just about all of the space on these medium format lenses. There's a PL adapter that I've seen this done with on the Alexa LF, but I've not actually seen it done yet with the V-Raptor, which I think is a pretty great camera. So stay tuned, I'll try to get that set up the next time I rent the V-Raptor. I remember the second that I put this shot with the Helios up, I was kind of blown away by how interesting it looked. Because I had nothing to compare it to yet, I wasn't even sure what my eye was noticing, but I just thought it looked interesting to me. And if we look at it compared to this Leica shot, there's some huge differences between these aside from the focal length. The most notable one to me immediately is the color difference. For the record, all of these shots are just Rec 709. So this is straight out of the same camera with the same settings. This Helios is sort of famous for its swirly bokeh, and you can kind of start to see it. This is pretty distorted through here. It's not just out of focus, it's also a bit distorted. Whereas this lens, obviously the focus is on the foreground here, so it's a little different. But this lens, it's much cleaner. There's some barrel distortion, but there's no kind of funk in the bokeh. I shot both of these in RAW, so you could easily match these two in color if you wanted. This shot right here, another Helios shot, I found this olive tree, and I knew that if I got it right, I could probably get a little swirliness going back here. I'm not trying to go for any of the crazy stuff that you see some still photographers pull off, which is awesome, but I needed to go a little subtler than that for this campaign. I thought it might still be kind of interesting to get some depth on it, and then, you know, some nice sort of dappled light on the face and whatnot. You know, part of it is that because I shoot with wide lenses so often on this fashion stuff, I think it was interesting for me to be forced to shoot with the 58, which on the focal reducer is really kind of a medium lens. It's not ultra long, but it's quite a bit longer than what I'm used to using. And so I was backing off, I was shooting through foreground stuff more. These colors are just so beautifully pastel, and it happens to really pull out the pinks and magentas on this dress as well. This was a shot where I just wanted to see how crazy it would be if I just ran full speed behind her with the wide lens. It was very bright out this day, so I basically was shooting this blind. If you take a look up in the corners here, you're gonna see heavy vignetting. I was a little surprised to see this, to be honest with you, because I know for a fact that there are people that are using Leica Rs on the V-Raptor, which has a larger field of view even than the Komodo with the focal reducer. I do think I was shooting this wide open, which tends to make vignetting worse. The wider lenses are usually the ones that suffer from this more, so my guess is like a 50 probably wouldn't have this issue. And the other thing is that this is the version 1 of the lens, which is from, I believe it was from 1979 or 78. It's quite an old lens. I wonder if the newer versions maybe don't vignette as much. I'm not sure. You know, it's certainly a great lens. I think probably moving forward on the Red Komodo, I'll just not use the focal reducer. Okay, this project I'm moving on to now is shot on the Zeiss Jenas, mostly on the 20 and a bit on the 35. This shot right here was actually from the test the day before we shot. And this is graded by the very talented Cameron Marigold. So it's not like this is straight out of the camera, but I do remember that it had a lot of saturation and a lot of contrast and just this sort of funk in the background that I thought was really interesting. I think I went to the 35 here for the closer sort of portrait-y shots. This shot right here is straight up borrowed from the Malik stuff. He and Chivo a lot of times have the camera sort of pushing forward, handheld, and then an actor entering from just behind and walking into camera. So I took that idea from them there. The shadow shot is from Tree of Life, where you basically shoot down and then flip the shot upside down. I mean, I guess in theory you could just have the camera upside down as well. When I use glass that has unique characteristics like these, even if it's happening at a subtle level, a domino effect starts. I see something a little different than I might if I were using a more neutral lens. And that encourages me to experiment in a certain direction. One shot leads to the next, whether it's tweaking a shot list that you already had or finding whole new scenes in the process. This is what I find so exciting about using glass with personality.